Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us today for Doing Better in America, our virtual event highlighting innovators in small business and education who've managed to reinvent themselves during the coronavirus pandemic. I want to tell you something. The reason why we're doing today's program is because this nation is hurting. There's a lot going on. People are having a tough time, and yet people are scrambling to get it right. They're scrambling to find ways to get ahead, and we wanted to give a profile to some of those few stories. Every story we talk about today is a microcosm of the major things that are going on around in America. So I hope you're inspired. I hope you're challenged. We know that there are also those who are having a tough time, but that is why my fantastic team put this together today. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Philip Morris International, for supporting today's conversations. Across the nation, many small business owners and educators are innovating. They're leveraging new and creative ways of operating their classes, their schools, their businesses, their homes, their families. Educators are relying heavily on technology and going virtually above and beyond to connect with their students. Small business owners are reorganizing online and investing in e-commerce to remain competitive and just alive. I can't wait to introduce you to these real-world heroes and innovators on the program today. We're pairing them up with leaders in the public policy space, in the political space. Isn't it cool? We're going to talk to a mayor from where I have a house, Chestertown, Maryland. We're going to talk to a congressman in just a moment from Ohio, someone I speak to all the time about, big, heady issues here in Washington. But we're going to go local today. We're going to talk to an innovative teacher and to the head of one of the largest teachers unions in the nation. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag The Hill Innovators. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. I always laugh at this. If you experience any problems with the live stream, just refresh the page and everything will magically get better. That's what I'm told. I hope it works for you. Now, to kick things off, we head to Cincinnati, Ohio, where Christine Kim's virtual pop-up plant shop led to her blossoming success as a business owner. She's on TikTok, she's on Instagram, she's all over social media. We're going to have fun talking to her. From a small garage to a permanent storefront in her town, Christine's growing business was not something she expected to flourish during this pandemic. Joining her is a lifelong Cincinnatian, if I'm saying that right, and he's the ranking member on the Small Business Committee, Congressman Steve Chabot. Steve, great to see you. Christine, great to meet you here. And I just want to first say thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I mean, this is sort of, I don't want to be accused of doing a feel good, but I'm fascinated by how people are scrambling at these times. So, Steve, I know you were scrambling and you were just elected. You were one of the ones really targeted. So welcome back to your spot. But let me just ask you, as you sort of look across, your terrain, your constituents, when you see what Flourish Grounds, as I understand, Flourish Grounds has done. How did that register with you as you look at your constituents and what they're doing to innovate and stay relevant and alive in this period?
Well, it's interesting how well Christine has been able to adjust in her business. And I've seen this all over my area. I represent the people in the greater Cincinnati area, and I'm the lead Republican on the House Small Business Committee. So I've gone around to about 70 small businesses in our area to see how they're adjusting, how they've handled getting a PPP loan, for example, if they've done that, how we can improve that whole process. And in the area of restaurants, for example, they in particular have been hard hit by COVID and have had to adjust. Sometimes it's because of local regulations or state regulations that say that they can only have 50%, of the normal customers within their facility, or even 25%, or that they can't have in room dining at all, and so they've had to go to delivery or carry out only. So small businesses are adjusting all over the country, and that's certainly what Christine has done in discussing with her how she's handled the pandemic and how you can actually stay in the business and to some degree thrive during that time.
Christine, I would love to hear, before COVID hit, what you were planning to do and what did you shift to?
Hi. So the original plan was have a mobile coffee plant cart to hit the farmers markets, because at the time I didn't have the funds for a building, nor could I find a rental property. So my plan of attack was farmers markets. So during the time of 2019, I took that time to really develop Flourish Grounds. And when 2020 came, well, we all know what happened. So I took that and somehow pivoted to Instagram that we know now.
Well, I think, one of the things I'd love to get a sense of, again, I'm bringing, I mean, this is sort of selfish of me, but a town I love, a small town in eastern shore of Maryland is Chestertown, Maryland, its own colonial town, and we had a farmer's market. And so when I read about you, we also have, I don't think she'll take offense at this, sort of a very animated person who runs the Kay McIntosh, and she goes around and she's got carts with flowers, and she's transformed the town by moving things around and making it just feel, more warm. Tell us what you're doing, what you've moved to sell your plants. So as you now are not doing farmers markets, but you're doing and selling things. Tell us what that looks like. I mean, you can even pitch it if you want. I don't care. Take a, do your business pitch.
So right now, so in the very beginning, I took it on Instagram during the time where it was really the initial lockdown where everyone was locked in their house. I was just rearranging my house, and then I thought, wow, this place needs some plants. Oh wait, I have the license to do so. So I did it. And during that time I was thinking, well, I'm sure everyone else is redecorating the house, so why don't I try to do this? And the only thing I could think of was Instagram, because it's such a powerful social media platform that I could reach out not only within our state, but literally the world. So I just kind of took it on Instagram. This is my idea. Let's see what happens. And the next thing I know, one round after another, we sold out. And then after when the restrictions have lifted, a lot of people messaged me to come out to see the plants. Well, I told them, I'm not a plant store. It's in my yard, in my garage. But if you guys feel like you want to do like a plant yard sale kind of thing, then
right.
And if you feel safe and you take the proper precautions, then all is welcome. And then during the summer months, we were dubbed as the garage store in Madisonville. And then, things started rolling from there.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. I want to, talk to you about Steve Chabot. You know him as Steve Chabot. I know him as Ranking Member Chabot, Chairman Chabot, Representative Chabot. When you kind of comes the intersection, Steve Chabot is great reputation working across lines for small business in America. What does small business need? What does Congress, what does the halls of public policy here in Washington need? And I'm going to, ask the congressman to come in and talk about, what's on the dashboard to continue to be supportive of small business in America.
Yeah, so I believe Congressman Chabot does a really great job with his PPP. But as a nation, I think making COVID relief grants more accessible for new businesses like myself is something important, just because we're legally established back in 2019, but nothing has rolled until this year. Technically, I've been a year in, but because of what happened, I don't really qualify for grants. So with that kind of stuff, I kind of wish that there's grants for people like me who don't have a lot of employees or don't have the necessary paper trail to meet the eligibility for grants. So that's the only thing I could think of. But I believe Congressman has been doing a really great job. I know he really cares about the small businesses here.
Let me ask Steve, the same question. Steve, the last time we spoke, you and I actually talked about ventures, micro firms that were smaller in scale than how we kind of classically looked at small businesses. And you said this was one of your areas of real concern. What does this town need to hear to get this equation right?
Well, we're close to having a second round of PPP loans available, and there would be a set aside in there for micro businesses, those that have 10 or fewer employees. And that may be, a lot of them weren't sophisticated enough to get in the first round. They either didn't have a long time relationship with a financial institution, so we ran out of money before they got in, or some other thing just stopped them from getting in the door. So we want to make sure that those who didn't get one in the first round, or businesses who maybe did get one but really need a second loan, that they're both eligible. I'll tell you another thing we've done in this legislation, if we can get it passed, and it has to be bipartisan, meaning Republicans and Democrats working together. It has to be bicameral, meaning the House and the Senate are working together. And the president, of course, has to be on board to sign it as well. So all those things have to come together. But we're also trying to make the forgiveness process more flexible for people. And because right now, people who had the loan are now going in and trying to make sure they don't have to pay the loan back. And it can be a pretty paperwork intensive project. So we're trying to simplify that so people don't have to pay that loan back. That was the idea when we passed this PPP program, was for those to be forgivable loans for the most part.
Steve, one of the things, and again, I don't know the answer. I sometimes ask questions I know the answers to, and sometimes I don't. But this one I don't, and we're going to have razor thin majorities, no matter which party leads in the House and the Senate. And it's going to be so much closer. And when it comes to small business, which is the backbone of business, is the backbone of employment, the backbone of entrepreneurship in America, I'm just wondering, do we need a roadshow or do we need a kind of workshop for members to understand how this world works? Is the literacy level of your colleagues where it should be when it comes to looking at the kind of, grit and detail and trouble of, small businesses in America and why? Because my assessment is this is an area that's in trouble. It's been in trouble for a while. And I'm just wondering where your head is in this.
Well, I do agree that we do need to educate those new members that come here to Congress, even some of the ones that have been around here for a while who may not appreciate how important small businesses are or what they have to deal with, whether it's regulations or taxation or, getting employees. Nowadays it can be workforce is tough. Prior to COVID hitting, the unemployment levels were so low that it was hard to find good qualified people for, a position that you had open. So I do think it's important for us to make sure that members are educated in what is important to America's small business. So I do agree that is something we ought to work on. The one other thing I'd mention, Steve, is every member of Congress, and there are 435 of us in the House, and of course 100 senators too. We all have small businesses in our district. So it's absolutely critical that we do understand what small businesses need and how to help them to be successful.
Again, I'm going to ask you both Christine and Steve. But let me start with Steve. With the Biden administration coming in on this theme, doing better in America, what does the Biden team need to do to qualify as doing better in your book?
Well, I think they're going to need to work with Congress. It's important to have the executive branch being the president, and the Small Business Administration is under the president too. So the head of that organization, and of course the new treasurer, the Secretary of Treasury. Right now it's Mnuchin, and he was very involved in both the crafting and the implementation of the PPP program, and then the regulations after that, and that was really important. So you're going to have the administration working closely with Congress to make sure that we can pass good legislation, and the existing legislation that's already on the books, that we implement those things so that we're not burdening small businesses with more regulations, and that can be a real challenge for a small business.
Christine, let me ask you the same thing. With the new presidential administration coming in, a lot of other people coming into new jobs as well, although Steve kept his job. What would you like to see in terms of the theme doing better? What do you think our nation needs to do better at?
I believe right now, I feel like the nation's been so divided this past year, especially with the pandemic and the election season. I think with the new president coming in, I just hope he just stand by his word and say it's for the people, by the people. And I really hope he stands by that, because right now it's so divided and it kills me. And as a small business owner, it's us versus the big box offices. And it's just like, we're just getting so slammed. And I just really hope that our administration and everyone at the White House will see that small businesses here are really trying to make what they can do, because our families are involved, our friends. Like, this is our livelihood. it's this or nothing. And I really hope that we'll find a solution to this weird year.
Hey, Christine, let me ask you, because I need to learn more about Flourish Grounds, and I don't know if you're largely a local business, whether you're doing any kind of, online presence and online sales or not, but how are you deploying social media? What are the things that are giving you leverage out there that you find surprising now?
So with it comes with social media, I think what made us really establish is that I answer every question that comes through our direct message. I answer every single one of them, and I just build this relationship with our audience. And I think that's what made us different from the rest of the businesses, is that we have such a close relationship with our customers that made us who we are now. And then as for online, we actually just launched our online shop today. So before then, it was just what we did from day one: take a picture of the plant. Here's the plant name, size, and how much it costs. So that was what made us through it. But when people come in and pick up the plants, they start to see like, oh, this store that has more things. And the next thing you know, they buy a little more stuff. But besides the transaction that happens between my customers, we get to know them. We know their names, we know their moms, we know their kids. And it's a relationship, not a transaction kind of thing for us. So I think that's what makes it really different.
Such a cool story. We're taking a question from the audience, and this one I'm going to ask Steve. Steve, I don't know if you know the answer to this one, but it's from Linda Lipinski, who's an architect at PSPC. She asked, can you please talk about how to find business support and resources in municipal and federal government levels? So is there a box of answers out there, a box of support that you'd like to convey to our viewers that they might not know about?
Yeah, there is. At the federal level, of course, you have the Small Business Administration, and they have a whole range of loans that are already on the books and available: the 7A loan program, the 504 loan program, and now, of course, the PPP, and then EIDL loans, which are disaster loans. So those are at the federal level, where I'm at in Congress. But in the CARES Act, for example, we gave a lot of money, about $150 billion, to states and local communities. Now, some of that was for making sure the schools were safe to reopen, making sure that police and firefighters are paid, that there's testing for COVID, that our healthcare workers get PPE, personal protective equipment. So there was money for that, but there was also money to help small businesses. So a lot of the cities and counties around the country have programs. Now, it's usually not a huge amount of money. It may be $5,000. It may be less than that. It may be $10,000, but every community is a little different. But they have loans that they can also, and the loan usually turns into a grant. So you usually don't have to pay it back, but every one's a little different. So there's the federal level. Now, the PPP, for example, you don't go to the SBA or the federal government. You go to your local bank or your local bank, a financial institution, or to a credit union, for example, to get that loan. But you could also call your local community, the city that you're in. I don't know what relationship you have with the local folks. Maybe you call the mayor or a member of city council, and they could look into it for you. You might call your county commissioner. It might be a township trustee. So whatever you are, because there's obviously 50 states, and they're all set up a little different. But there is money available at the local level in most areas as well.
Well, I want to thank you both. Steve Chabot, I want to just say one thing about you, and Christine made, he sort of inspired us. We had a conversation a couple of months back on this, and I was so impressed that he was going out and talking to small businesses. The same day I talked to former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who he and his wife started a private revolving loan fund to help, small businesses like yours just get to, the end of the month or the end of the next month to kind of, hold things together. And it just said, there's a lot going on as companies are scrambling to make this time work. So, Steve, thank you for inspiring today's program, and thanks for joining us today. So, Christine Kim Funke, owner of Flourish Ground, Steve Chabot, the senior Republican, the ranking member of the House Small Business Committee. I hope you'll both be back, and thanks for sharing your story today.
Thank you very much, and best of luck to you, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Maxie Hollingworth is a pre-K through fifth grade math teacher. And I love that, pre-K through fifth grade math teacher. I wish I had her when I was young. And she's in Houston, Texas. Maxie leads reading and math interventions at her school. Even though the learning process has moved online, she's not let it hold her back. And joining her is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, a good friend of mine, Randy Weingarten, who's worked tirelessly for the safe reopening of schools. I want to thank you both for joining us. Randy, I would love to hear how many Maxies out there are there. We're going to hear Maxie's story in a moment, but how many Maxies are out there in terms of those people scrambling, trying to hold it together? And let me just say that I know that while Maxie is innovative in this space, I also know it's exhausting. And I just want to read one thing. I've got it somewhere in my papers. I just loved it. That are with me just a moment, folks. This is not the pretty side of live TV, but it's just so great, a tweet. She says, cooking and toggling between two virtual meetings. 8-year-old roommate, sous chef, is engrossed in this discussion on effective math practices. Can't get good help these days. It's a remarkably wonderful tweet filled with opportunity and tension. So, with that, so Randy, tell us what the map looks like of talent and innovation out in the world that you're working with.
Well, look, there's no one like Maxie. Every one of our members, or so many of our members, are just amazing people. They are innovative, they are creative, they are resilient, they are compassionate, they are smart, they are savvy, and they are making a difference with kids every day in very uncertain times. And Maxie is an amazing example of that. And without taking anything away from Maxie, and I hate when there's these kind of comparisons, there's hundreds of thousands of people, of educators all over the country, really trying to figure out what to do to reach kids in an uncertain time when we're not getting the help or support from, the powers that be, whether it be the current president, or whether it be the current Secretary of Education, and frankly, whether it be in many, many cases, current superintendents or legislators who are looking at all of this through whatever political haze and lens they do. And basically, it's come down to individual teachers to try to figure out how to engage kids, how to make them feel safe, how to really focus on instruction in the midst of this once in 100-year pandemic. And that's exactly what Maxie is doing every single day.
Well, that's a very sobering. Maxie, if I have it right, my understanding is about 60% of your students are online and the other chunk are in the classroom. So you're doing this hybrid thing. So tell us how you're holding it together.
It's, I feel some days like I'm really, I feel slapstick some days. It feels very well planned some days. It's every day is incredibly different. Every day is incredibly challenging. I have to make sure that I am fully engaging the students who are learning remotely. I have to get a real finger on the pulse of attention levels and understanding for the students who are in person. It's just really a challenge. And I'm very grateful to the parents who are making the sacrifice, because the majority of the students in my district did choose to learn remotely. And so that means that the parents are making a real sacrifice. We know that there are, especially mothers in particular, who have taken the brunt of this, and they have either had to quit their jobs or they have lost their jobs. And we're in a district that's majority Black and Hispanic. And so we've got real concerns with making sure that they are making ground and not losing ground, but also that our teachers and our education support staff are supported and have the resources that they need in order to actually meet the needs of all of our students. And that's the real challenge there. It's everyone is making a sacrifice. And in order for me to do my job, I've had to make some financial sacrifices, some personal sacrifices. I'm hoping that those sacrifices actually do pay off.
Hey, Maxie, are there any things that you've stumbled into in this time? And I know this is an awkward question. Has anything gone better than you thought it would? Or have you found any, tricks or bank shots, in your responsibilities with these kids that, you were surprised by? that might give us some insight into that terrain a little bit?
Oh, sure. I was actually very surprised at how fluidly I took to the technology, to using learning platforms. I am a traditionalist. I, and my research tells me, I have a research background, and that tells me that children learn best in person, and they still do. That hasn't changed. But how they have really taken to the various learning platforms that we were required to learn this year, and really fast. And so my learning curve was really very high, but I'm happy that I've been able to incorporate that into my traditional instructional practices. What I have been surprised by is that interventions have been a lot easier to do remotely than I anticipated. And it's a lot easier to do that one-on-one. Actually, today, Thursday, is the day that I do interventions all day. And it goes a lot better because I've got a real focused set of kids, and I'm able to really work with them in a very intense way that I would not have been able to do normally. So I'm able to manage my time a lot better. Transitions are a lot more seamless. And some of that is just logistically. We have fewer students. We're not moving around as much. So my day really does, it goes very fast. But there are definitely some things that I would do differently.
No, I mean, I don't want to pry, but your 8-year-old sous chef is, I assume, someone you cohabit with in your family?
Yes, she's actually in the other room because I teach. Actually, I was very lucky to be able to apply for and be selected for a virtual teaching position. And because my 8-year-old sous chef has a pre-existing medical condition, it was important for me to be able to work from home. And so she is learning from home, as is my 11-year-old. And so she's actually in the other room in her classroom, and she's doing a science project right now. And I'm gonna, when I'm done with this interview, we'll see what kind of mess she's made.
So Randy, when we get to the issues of flexibility
No
in teaching,
explosions, right?
Yeah,
No
exactly.
explosions.
So with flexibility in teaching, President-elect Biden, Kamala Harris, Tony Fauci, Anthony Fauci, I should say, others have come out and said we need to get kids in schools, that there are, particularly in the areas that Maxie teaches, in the pre-K through 5, it's almost vital to get them back into schools. We need special needs kids, get them back into schools. And Randy, I know you've been addressing this. So as I'd like our viewers to get a picture. And in this time of high drama, of high challenge, how can these kids go back to school? And what is, to hear what Maxie's talking about, the flexibility she needs, what would that package look like? What do we do to arm schools and to get this so that we can stop talking about this and get back to doing, the right kind of safe education?
Right. So number one, what Dr. Fauci and President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris have said is that first and foremost, you actually have to tackle the curve. Like, you can't think about reopening more fulsomely as you have a surge of unvarnished of unprecedented dimensions. And so, if you listen to what they've said, we do actually have to tackle the curve right now, and we're getting perilously close to our entire healthcare system collapsing. And but there is, so schools are not an island, but there is really good news from the fact that we in places like New York City, in the 6 or 8 weeks where they were opened in September and October, we had very good data that showed that schools themselves were not super spreaders, particularly elementary schools. And so based upon that data, and it was based upon the testing that the UFT, my union, insisted on, and there was the same kind of naysayers saying it costs too much, would never be able to do it. But that's the data that everybody is now relying on to say that with safeguards like masks and physical distancing and cleaning and ventilation, and using testing aggressively so you have an early warning system, that we believe that that schools for kids with special needs and schools for elementary school, kids can actually be back in school, and that's really good news. But I want to actually say to couple it with something that Maxie just said, which is the key to all of this is that we must make sure that for both teachers and for parents, they have real accommodations. Like they can actually say, I don't trust it yet, so I need to still have remote learning. And for educators, they need to be able to say, my kid is immunocompromised. I need to have that accommodation. You can't have people walk into school who are fearful that their lives are or their kids' lives or their parents' lives are going to be harmed because of asymptomatic spread. So that is going to have to be a real piece in the reopening of schools, school buildings in the next semester. But as you said, Steve, I've put out in your publication in The Hill, basically an 8-point plan of how we can actually have real in-school learning next semester, tackle the virus, have these safeguards, have testing, but also focus on elementary schools and schools for kids with special needs, but also make sure that we align the vaccination priority with schools that are reopening. And so that after healthcare personnel who should be first on the priority list and elderly who are really at risk, particularly in nursing homes, that we then have teachers who are back in school in person be the next priority. Because we know that in-school learning works better than remote. But as Maxie just said, remote is a good supplement, and we need to actually figure out ways of what we've learned here, like on one-to-one tutoring or things like that, that we can also use. And that means really listening to teachers. And if we were really listening to teachers, one practice that teachers will tell you does not work is if you are in school talking to a group of kids and teaching them and trying to do live streaming at the same time. So bottom line, safeguards are working, particularly for younger kids. Younger kids are listening to the rules more than older kids.
Right.
Tackle the curve. Let's reopen schools safely in the spring semester as we're tackling that curve and plateauing it with the safeguards and testing. But listen to teachers about what we need to do better instructionally and what we need to do to address the well-being of kids.
Let me tell our viewers that Randy Weingarten's op-ed page is on the Hill's opinion pages. It was published on Monday, and it's a very powerful kind of how to do it, what we need sort of roster. We're sort of in lightning round right now, Maxie, because we're running out of time, but I wanted to kind of get to you because I know you have views on how we need to make education sustainably funded, how we need to solve the education equity challenge. And I know this is unfair at the minute, but I want to give you an opportunity to give us a few top-of-mind thoughts that you have on that front.
I think the main thing is that we really need to approach education policy very differently. We need to have leaders at the state and at the federal level who, number one, have some background in public education. They're going to be much better informed than policymakers and lawmakers who don't have a background in education and are relying on trends or the next fad in education. And we've seen too much of that. And we have got to get back to the fundamentals. What does research tell us about how children learn best? What does research tell us about best practices instruction? We know that. We have plenty of colleges of education around the country that are doing top-notch teacher development. And so we know these things. It's time for us to use and implement and fund. The other thing is that we need to start funding public education in a very different way. Property taxes is not the way to get it done. We know this. So we have enough data right now that tells us what works and what doesn't. It's now time to get a change in leadership. We need a change in leadership that can be bold. We need a change that is much more progressive than what we've had. We need to equitably support public schools, make the rules and regulations the same for charter and public schools. So there are lots of things that we need to do, but it all starts with education policy. We are losing teachers before this pandemic. There's a teacher shortage. We are not pulling in enough people who want to come into this profession. And in order to make that change happen, we're going to have to look at education policy as well. So we've got lots of things that we have to do. So teacher recruitment, equity, we've got to make sure that all of our students are well served by highly qualified teachers. And then also, of course, we've got to get rid of these mandates for standardized testing.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to have you back because that's a full load. We're going to have to have a broader discussion. But we've got a question from our audience from Greg. Greg?
Hello. I'm Greg Waples with the National Association of Secondary School Principals. My question has to do with the homework gap that many K-12 students find themselves in. Millions of children were already falling behind before the pandemic began due to lack of access to broadband connectivity, and the problem has now gotten much worse. Can you discuss what federal policy solutions need to be enacted to close the homework gap for students learning remotely?
Randy, let me ask you to tackle that.
So, first off, thank you for the work that principals are doing all across the country trying to figure out. There are a lot of really great principals who are trying to work with really great teachers like Maxie to figure out how to deal with all of the million questions that come up in terms of helping kids right now. But I think part of the problem, Greg, is that we call it the homework gap. It's not the homework gap. It's an equity issue. It is the fact that 15 million kids, and sorry that I get so angry about this, 15 million kids in America don't have access to connectivity. And so, if your home does not have the high-speed internet that I have right now, that my family is paying $250 a month for, how are you going to actually be able to do video on remote in the way in which you have to? How are you going to actually, and then what happens in terms of not having or having a computer? You can't use, this is a Apple smartphone. We need to have computers, not smartphones, for kids. So yes, we need the E-rate program to get better. We need it to be expanded. But this should have been in the CARES 1 package, and this should be in the package right now. And instead of McConnell continuing to say, we can't fund this or we can't fund that, these things should be funded right now and should have been funded months and months ago. It's not a homework issue. It's an equity issue. It's an instruction issue. It's a well-being issue. And we need to do that for all of our kids.
Thank you. Maxie, do you have a quick bit on that?
I do. I think one of the main challenges is that when we don't look at what resources that we need to get into the hands of our students who are learning at home, as well as the students who are in the classroom, we've got to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. I've got students who are learning at home who don't have math manipulatives like this base 10 block I've got here on my desk because we didn't have the funding to be able to send home kits. Now, my daughter's school could do that because she attends a highly resourced public school that is highly resourced because the parents raise $120,000 a year for that campus. So I teach at a Title I campus, but my daughter attends a highly resourced public education school. And that difference shouldn't be there. My daughter's getting a very good education, and the students in my school should get the same one because the funding is equitable.
Can I just thank you both? This is very, very candid. It has both elements that are inspiring and, help our people. And I can also hear the palpable frustration. I want to thank Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, Maxie Hollingsworth, educator and interventionist in Houston, Texas. I hope you'll both be back because I don't think we're done with this set of topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for the sponsor perspective segment of our program. Before we get underway, a quick clarification. While this interview is being conducted by me and the questions are mine, this next portion of the event shouldn't be considered editorial. With that, I'm pleased to be joined by Jacek Olczak, Chief Operating Officer at Philip Morris International. Jacek, great to see you, and great to see each other transatlantically. But I guess my question to you as we start out is, everyone's gone through tough times. I mean, these have been troubled, complicated times. We've had to redo and reorganize this. You have employees and you have clients. Tell us what the top line ways in which your company has adapted, evolved for those that you're interacting with and serving.
Oh, as you know, Philip Morris International operates in more than 100 markets. So, we've got dragged into the situations pretty fast. already in February, we start, having situations, challenging situations in a number of markets. I think we reacted like, many other corporations. I mean, at first, and the most important is you really try to protect your people and do whatever you can in order to minimize the risk of passing the virus, provide the working conditions where those who have to come to the offices or to the factories can really do it with the maximum safety protocols in place. We obviously went to our business partners, retailers. There is many, independent retailers in, most of the countries which, require the specific and special support. It might sound a little bit, uneventful from today's perspective, but at the beginning of the year, we all remember. People were lacking face masks, people were short on sanitizers, people were short of respirators in the hospitals. We put almost our entire supply chain at the service of the public, and whoever was requiring the help would try to provide. But the thing which I am personally the most proud of, that when we see our employees on the individual basis trying to help the people who are living with them or who are living, next to them. My wife, was providing a food purchasing services to all the villagers, living in my village. And there are thousands of examples in places where we live, where we start acting like a human beings, like a proper human beings, which especially this times was very encouraging. So it's a very touching moment. I wish, we never had to go through this again. But at the end of the day, you see that there is still so much normal human interactions which can take place when people know how to, take care of each other and support each other in this difficult time. So the role of Philip Morris for the company was to facilitate as much as possible that our people, can provide this help, that services. And this is not only about, giving the donations or cutting a check. Is this reactions at the employee individual level when they can demonstrate how strong the human values are in them and how they can act properly is the moment when myself, I take a lot of encouragement from how our people behave at the time.
It's very heartening to hear the human stories in these times of, people trying to do better, people trying to reach out in ways they might not have done before. And I see it across the board as well. I guess another side is perhaps a little more in the sensitive space. I know that you personally, and I've interviewed and talked to many people in your company, feel very committed to this transition in your products from old line classic cigarettes to various e-products, and that there are health issues. And we're in the middle of a global health crisis. Do you think that this puts a turbocharger behind that mission, that part of this question of applying science to the habits we have is something that you feel even more strongly now, your colleagues feel more strongly in the middle of a global pandemic?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We continue to be, highly committed and motivated and enthusiastic that finally we believe bringing the solutions to smoking is so much, within the reach of our hand. I personally think that, in many locations, in many countries, you could solve the problem of smoking in such a short period of time as 10 years. Everyone is alike. The risk of smoking, let's be very clear, risks of smoking are known to everyone. The best advice we can give to people who don't smoke is to, don't start. For those who smoke, they should quit, but they also have to recognize that there are many, many men and women who just won't quit. And here I think the products from the category of, potentially harm reduced products, which are, significantly reducing the exposure to the toxicants, compounds in the smoke are coming at play. And I think, it's a high time that, many smokers in many countries, including the US, have an access to the information about the product, reliable information, verified. And today the science and the verification processes are at the level that this we can offer and have an access to the product. I am very pleased that this is a year where, we also received the authorization from Food and Drug Administrations in the US. I mean, it's the big achievement for us, and it culminates somehow an important step that is not only about the inventing these products, developing this product, but having a very robust scientific substantiation that this product is a better alternative than continuing smoking. But you know, our journey with this product, many people don't know about it, started well under President Obama administration. And, you know, we continued for the Obama administrations, we continued for the President Donald Trump administrations, and we hope we can accelerate with the new administration in Washington.
Right. Let me ask, since you mentioned next year and you sort of the timeline, I mean, I'm going to ask you a tough question. As you look into 2021, and we're on the eve of 2021, what would be doing better for Philip Morris International, and what would you feel like if you got to the end of the year and you hadn't moved the needle on something, what would constitute failure for you?
Well, failure, I would rather describe how the success would look like, and then maybe we can, go and by deduction see how the failure may look like. I am by nature an optimist person. I was born optimist, right? I was always joking that presumably I was the only baby in a hospital who didn't welcome this word with a cry. I was smiling from day one, and I'd rather stay like this. I would like that the fear which so much penetrated us in 2020 is finally disappearing. And there's a fear of myself, of my health, fear of the health of my people who are close to me, of my family, of my employees, of the people with whom I am collaborating, that fear disappears. I think it's a big role for the proper messaging. Hopefully the vaccine is going to penetrate all geographies fast next year, and I hope to see that this fear, which drives this anxiety very often, etc., is finally left behind us. This is how I would like the 2020-21 to finish. It's too much which was put on our shoulders as individuals, as a group of people, and I believe it's really important that we take this this luggage, this very heavy weight from our shoulders, and we all can focus what is very important. I think the crisis also show us that collaborations, when parties collaborate, despite the fact that they might have different opinions, different starting points, that through the collaboration, we can really go and solve the very important problems in this world. We know that, to diminish the impact or minimize somehow the impact of the coronavirus, how much collaborations you need from us and the individuals, from the health community, from the scientists, from the pharma companies, you name it. I mean, from the logistics companies, from the companies which now will have the biggest challenge, how to deliver these vaccines to so many places in our countries. Everyone has a place to play here, has a role to play here. And I believe in 2021, we will not forget that we could have achieved so many things in 2020 thanks to the collaborations that were not focused on building the bridges, the ruining the bridges, demolishing the bridges, but rather building the bridges, despite the fact that we might have at the beginning, what one could say, unreconcilable differences, that we focus with the one objective of agenda, and really we can live in a better world.
Right. Well, Jacek Olczak, Philip Morris International Chief Operating Officer, I really appreciate you talking about this, because this is a story of resilience, it's a story of adaptation, it's a story of innovation, and that's why we are talking with those people who are doing that, real human stories here today. So thank you for supporting today's program, and thank you for your candid thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
To close out the program, we're swinging over to Chestertown, Maryland, where Melissa McGlynn took a leap of faith and began serving homemade cottage pies at the Chestertown Farmers Market. They line up at like 7 a.m. and it doesn't even open till 8 a.m. It's crazy. We'll get into that. Her venture was met with such success, she's looking to expand soon. And I can attest to the quality of the pies, as I've been lucky enough to try a few of them myself. Mayor Chris Serino of Chestertown is also with us. Throughout his term as mayor, Chris has worked to improve relations with local business leaders, in addition to modernizing the town's use of social media for connecting his community. Welcome to you both. Mayor Serino, let me ask you, we're really kind of looking at all the challenges that this COVID era has brought. I have watched a lot, not all, of your weekly, COVID briefings as you talk about the life of the town, what it's doing, how you're dealing with positivity rates, but also how the business and social and community thing. So let me get an understanding. I often ask mayors and governors what's on their dashboard. Before we get to Melissa, can you tell us what are the key elements of this time that are on your dashboard?
Well, I think the main thing is just trying to keep those lines of communication with your constituents open during a time period where you really can't have people gather at town hall. Before this year began, I'd literally never heard of Zoom. The only people I've ever seen wearing a mask would be like if I saw footage of people maybe in some Asian country where they'd had outbreaks, that we'd never experienced. So I remember reading in one of our newspapers about, COVID coming to Kent County, and one of the comments was, "Where's Mayor Serino in all this?" So at that time, Governor Cuomo in New York City was giving daily briefings to the city because things were so dire and they were taking very extreme actions. And I thought, even though I have no staff and no film crew, how could I do something similar? So basically, my wife and I drove the 3 blocks over here to Town Hall, right where I'm sitting. She broke out her iPhone. And then the trick for me was doing an announcement to the town, basically to say, hey, look, we're all paying attention to this. We're watching the metrics just like everybody else. These are some actions we all need to do to stay safe. And then I had to make sure I did it in one long continuous take so that neither one of us had to do a lot of editing work. And then we posted it on a Facebook site that the town created specifically to communicate with our residents about COVID. And then just in general, we're pretty lucky. We're a small rural county, so there's a little bit of social distancing kind of built into the fabric of where we live. We're not super condensed like a major metropolitan area. And in some ways that's worked to our advantage. We actually have seen an uptick in daily visitations from tourists. For example, our marina was full all summer because we are a desirable destination because our metrics were generally pretty low throughout the year. But just generally using different platforms that we've never used before to try to communicate both safety and economic messages to our constituents has been a real challenge. But I think, those videos, like you said, they've been pretty popular. Like a couple had like 5,000 views. Anybody that watches 5,000 views of anything in this town, that's a big number for us.
Well, let me ask you, Chris, were you, and I can call him Chris because I know Mayor Chris.
Yeah, sure.
But were you irritated at the public safety calls about how long the lines were for Melissa McGlynn's pies?
Those calls are legit justified, as you said. Like we've tried, my wife and I have tried twice now to get one of these pot pies, and it's like trying to buy like a bar of gold. The lines are very long. So yes, that's one of the reasons I'm doing these videos, Steve, is I've got to say like, hey, if you're going to the farmer's market, wear your mask and distance because you're going to be standing in Melissa's line for like 45 minutes. And so stay safe while you're doing it. But that's just another example, like literally at the beginning of the year, April, May, do we keep the farmer's market open? That was like a life and death decision. And for a small town mayor, like literally like making almost no money, like that's not usually what a small town mayor signs up to do. So it's just been such a crazy year. So it really is nice that you're doing the show and kind of showing some of the nuggets that are shining during this rather dark period for public health.
Well, Melissa, you were formerly trained as a pastry chef, as I understand. I guess with the patisserie and baking program of the Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School. So you're a fancy cooker, but you were. I mean, I just can be honest. You were having a tough time. And I love, as I asked, our small business owner earlier in this program. Tell me what it was like before or during COVID, and tell me what you pivoted to.
Well, I was working as the pastry chef for one of our favorite restaurants in town, Louisa's, wonderful Italian restaurant. And March came and I was laid off. And I sat in basically a state of depression for a little bit. And I thought, well, what can I do? How can I use this time productively to reinvent myself? And what can I do that nobody else in town is doing? And that was really, really important for me to not step on anybody's toes. It is a small town. We all know each other. We all interact and really love each other. And as a community, I really thought, what niche needs to be filled? And I thought, well, why not savory pot pies? Nobody's doing it. And as a kid, it was one of my favorite things to eat. So I took what I learned at Le Cordon Bleu out in Pasadena, California. I was out there for a little bit living with my sister, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. And I moved back here and I started it. And the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. And I really thank the town. I thank the mayor. I thank the farmers market. I think that's one of the greatest ways that, especially in rural towns, we can continue to, promote local businesses, promote farmers, promote entrepreneurs. And I really hope that of all the horrible things that came out of 2020, this new business of mine, McGlynn's Cottage Pies, has been the high point of my life. And I don't know if I would have done it without the pandemic, which is crazy. But I'm thrilled. If you're in Chestertown on Saturday mornings, come down to the farmers market. We're making as many pies as we can right now to try and fulfill. We don't have ordering yet, but we will at some point. But and I hope that other people will be inspired to do the same thing, to also reinvent themselves, even at the age of 50, because it's never too late. It's never too late to start something new and to step out of your boundaries and challenge yourself. And that's what this is all about. And I'm thrilled that it's a success.
Oh, it's a great story. I mean, I should tell people that, I have, in fact, been a consumer of the pies. And it's a very scary thing, because if you actually know Melissa or her folks, and you try and get a pie on the side and not stand in the line, you take your life in your hands. But let me ask you another thing. I also just want to be real that COVID struck different communities in America differently. It struck communities of color differently. It hit across socioeconomic groups differently. Chestertown is a historic colonial town, and the divides that are in a lot of small towns, racially, economically, are in this town as well. So we had, racial divisions in this nation. We've had economic hardship in this country, and we've had, amazingly, a health endangering tsunami hitting the country. Mayor Serino, I'd best be interested in whether you think, in a weird way, there have been opportunities to rewire towns, to change the way, trust is dealt with in a town. Or do you think this is going to be an ongoing set of challenges for a long time? Do you think there have been opportunities in doing better on race, on inequality, on jobs and inclusion than we've been dealing with before?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I think the answer kind of remains to be seen. There's no question that after the George Floyd incident, the town was faced with some really challenging decisions, because you saw the demonstrations nationwide in these huge cities like Philadelphia and New York, but our people wanted to march as well. So, and that was in the middle of right after we'd been on lockdown. So as a mayor, you have to say, should we give a permit to a march where we know we're going to be having people gathering in these dense clusters? Is that a good idea? But you really couldn't say no, because to deny that right to demonstrate would have made the problem that much worse. So in some ways, yes, I think that the combination has really compelled us to have these more difficult discussions. But I will say the answers are still not easy. I was talking to somebody earlier this morning about this. I feel like, as the mayor of a town that was founded in 1706, I've been the mayor for 7 years. I'm the recipient of hundreds of years of discriminatory policies, and then, slavery, and then another 100 years of Jim Crow policies that were blatantly designed to put Black people in certain areas of town and kind of keep them in their place. So what's challenging for me is there's not really racist policies on the books that I can just erase because they're so blatantly wrong. It's more subtle now. It's, how do we create more opportunities and education and employment for people? And those are, I think, in some ways, much harder challenges that take more discussion and more work. And I think, I do think the combination of the pandemic and then the seriousness of the awakening that sort of our whole country is at has really forced everybody to the table. But I will say this has been by far the longest year of my entire life. And the challenging part about the social justice issues is there's really no great end game. There's no finish line. This is something that's going to be going on for decades. And all I can really do is play my part to keep the dialogue flowing, to make this community as welcoming as I can. and to try to right past wrongs insofar as I'm able to from a policy standpoint. And that's the hardest challenge that there is.
Melissa, I'd be interested in your take because I know, I know that you worked with Little Theater. You worked across these lines, and I also see the line of, folks, for your crazy long lines for the, McGlynn pies, who are. It is a diverse array of people, but we are in a time where I think, one of the magical things that I think is positive in the town is parts of the town are talking with each other, other parts of the town in ways I haven't seen for a long there. I'm asking myself whether we're seeing in small town Chestertown is what may be happening in small town America in many other places. I don't know. I think it may be. That maybe this combination of things is possibly getting people out of their silos and talking more. But what's your sense, Melissa?
Yeah, I really hope so. I think that because we are a small town and it's weird, we do know a lot of the community knows each other, but then there seems to be a whole element of the community that just now is getting their voice. And they are talking about, our new slogan in town, one of the things we're focusing on, and Chris can talk about this, is that Chestertown unites against racism. It's very important for us to be welcoming to everybody and to realize that there are wrongs in our history that can be fixed with open dialogue and with open minds and open hearts. And that's really where the heart of every small town, I think, in America should be. So I'm hoping that we can use 2020 as a time of grieving and a time of loss that leads us to rebuilding and leads us to hope and light and love. So.
Oh, that's very powerful. Let me ask you, both of you for a second. We have a lot of small businesses in Chestertown that have pivoted. Melissa's one. Scott Budden and Orchard Point Oysters went to Consumers Direct for the first time rather than just Le Diplomat restaurant in D.C. or the Jefferson Hotel, and things like that. You have the Chester Wine and Cheese Company has gone, online in certain ways. So there are lots of these things that have happened. But I'm interested in the questions of what's replicable about the good side of this story that others listening right now ought to think about. So I'll go to both of you just as we wrap this up. Melissa, if you're communicating with somebody who still needs to make that pivot in this town, what are some of the guardrails or what are some of the opportunity lights, if you will, both, danger and opportunity that you think they ought to think about if they're trying to make the pivot in this time?
I think the danger is to fall into what's safe and what we know. It is very courageous and difficult to step out of your comfort zone, but do it. Do it. Open up online ordering or open up a curbside takeout. Change your menu up if you're a restaurant. Communicate with people. Come down to the market. Come down. Talk to the local politicians. The best thing that we can do as a community is to continue talking to each other and to get out of your comfort zone. Reinvent yourself. Not now. When are you going to do it?
Fascinating. Mayor Chris Serino, what is your thinking on that?
I think the pandemic has really compelled everybody to be really adaptable. One thing that's been interesting to me is the technology. Actually, as I said, I'd never heard of Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, or any of this software, and it's actually been very effective, actually, in removing physical barriers to get people to our meetings. A typical mayor and council meeting in Chestertown during a normal time period might draw 4 or 5 people to town hall because you have to drive there to sit through the meeting and physically be in the room, but now you don't. And in some ways, it's made our meetings more participatory because people can literally be sitting at their kitchen table drinking a glass of wine, discreetly and off camera, of course, and participate in our meetings that way. And our meeting participation has gone way up. So in some ways, it's been an eye-opener that the technology really can help us be more efficient in reaching our constituents. The videos are another small example of that. And then in terms of the businesses, it's caused the town to really look into ways that we can open up public spaces. So we've had nights where we blocked off public streets and had outdoor dining for certain venues. We reconfigured the whole farmers market so that it's more of a street festival rather than in a very condensed small pocket park where it used to be. And those models are probably things that we're going to continue to do, because not only were they great for COVID, they were just great adjustments overall. So the pandemic has compelled us to modify things that we would have probably just kept doing a certain way in perpetuity without being so shaken up by the public health aspect and needing to space things out. It made us rethink the way we lay out certain events that we have. And I think that will continue.
Chris, which federal office are you thinking of running for next?
I'll tell you what, Steve, at the end of next year, I need a hiatus. So we could talk discreetly off camera about that maybe later.
Well, that itself might be news. So Mayor Chris Serino of Chestertown, Maryland, I highly recommend that everybody go and visit and go early for the lines for McGlynn's Cottage Pies. Melissa McGlynn, the owner and the founder of McGlynn's Pies, thank you both so much for anchoring today's program for us.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
And can I make a quick shout out to the Betterton American Legion for being my home and my kitchen, and they do great things for the community. And again, thank you all so much.
Great Betterton American Legion. Go, go, go. Thank you both so much. Well, that brings us to the end of our program today. I just want to say it's something to think about, to look at your neighbors, look at your businesses, look at your schools, see what's going on there in this time of challenge, because there's a lot of interesting innovation and shifting and inflection points at this time. And some of it is tough and not a good story, but some of it is a very good story. A big thank you to Philip Morris International and to all of you attendees for joining us for this discussion today. If you missed any of these conversations, we're going to have the video of the entire program up shortly. I'm Steve Clemens. Be well.